What is going on, guys? We are back playing some more Surviving with EnderIO. Today we're going to be discussing the farming station, which is an extremely popular farming block that is offered by EnderIO, and if I had to venture a guess as to why it's more popular than pretty much every other farming block that's offered, it would have to be because it's extremely versatile. Now I am going to be covering all of the stuff that you can do with it a little bit later in this episode, so I'm going to leave it at just saying it's pretty versatile right now. Because there are a couple things that I want to cover before we actually get into the crafting portion of the episode and going over all the stuff that you can actually do at the farming station. So you may have noticed, if you frequent my channel, that the video uploads have been a little bit, few and far between this last week. And if you haven't seen my updates on Twitter or in the comments of a previous video, it's because I was on spring break, and unfortunately I could not take my desktop computer with me. I did have a laptop, but I can't really record with that, or at least get high quality videos out with that. So unfortunately there were really no uploads over break. I did manage to backlog one video, but other than that I couldn't really upload. But luckily I have returned to school now and everything should be good to go. Unfortunately though, I did get sick pretty much the day before I came back to school. I have a pretty bad sore throat right now and a pretty stuffy nose, which are pretty much two of the worst things that you can have when you want to record, mainly just because it'll butcher your voice and there's not much you can do about it. So I tried my best to make my voice sound as normal as possible, but if it does sound a little bit weird, that is why. Now, on kind of a secondary note, you may notice there's a lot of stuff going on in the relocator obelisk room that we set up last episode. I did upgrade to an octadic capacitor, but something I did not seem to take into account was the fact that Endermen need to fall a very, very long distance before they actually die. So although pretty much everything else is dying upon impact with the ground, all of the Endermen are living with about 4 to 5 hearts. So I have to go in there manually and kill them with the Ender, which really isn't the worst thing in the world. It gets me a fair bit of XP. And if we look in here, you can see we've got a lot of drops other than Enderman drops, but that's because I've only gone in there and killed them once and got pretty lucky with getting an Enderman head. So this is working flawlessly. I wanted to show you guys just how good it can be, and so hopefully this shows it. The rates will be a little bit decreased just because the Endermen are all sitting in there and kind of filling it up, but other than that, we can jump into today's episode. Okay, so now that all those updates are out of the way, we can actually get into the crafting and setting things up for today's episode. So the crafting actually should not take that long, and that's because the farming station is pretty simple to make. There's not a lot that goes into it, and everything else that's in this chest is either going to allow us to run the farming station in terms of, the power stuff we've got right here, or whatever we're going to be growing down here, and then just the tools we're going to be using over here. So all that stuff, very, very cheap. The power isn't even required for this. You can just hook it up to an existing power setup. I'm just doing its own because I want it to be able to function as best it can. If we've got a bunch of machines running, it might run out of power, so I'm just having it with its own power. But really the only crafting that needs to be done is the farming station itself, which is going to take 1 diamond hoe, 4 electrical steel, a machine chassis, pulsating crystals, which are actually really easy for me to get now because we've got all the Enderman drops coming in from the farm. Granted, I do have to kill them on my own, but then along with that we need a Z logic controller, which is probably the most annoying thing to make with this, but it really isn't that bad. We've worked with the slice and splice before. Everything should be set up in terms of the tools in there, and we have the 2 solarium, a zombie head, a piece of redstone, and 2 silicon. So we can grab that out right now and just head over here and throw it in, and then I'll discuss a couple other things while we do that. So what we can do right now is take some of the tools that we're going to be working with and enchant them. Now unfortunately, since we're only working with a diamond axe and a diamond hoe, you can't enchant a hoe unless you use an anvil to apply unbreaking, or I think there's 2 other enchants that you can use, so we're not going to enchant that, but we are going to enchant the diamond axe. Not many enchants that would be super helpful here, but it does take enchants into account when it's running the farming station itself, so it's always good to enchant any tools that you can, especially if it's a diamond tool. You can't put any durability into it, but I would suggest putting a very high durability tool in there because it will eventually break and need to be replaced. So we'll take this stuff out and we'll just enchant it for fun because I have a fair bit of experience right now, and let's see what we get. Wow, so all we got was auto smelt. Okay, well that's a little unfortunate. I don't even know how that's going to interact with this, but it might be fun to actually see. So next thing, we can just grab out all of this stuff in here. We're going to be planting a bunch of different stuff today using this to show its versatility, like I mentioned before, since you have the ability to actually set up 4 different quadrants of different things to be planted. Unfortunately, we only have 3 things right now, but I'm going to double up on the saplings just because I actually want to use the wood for something in a future episode. So we can get our Z logic controller out. We can grab out all the stuff in here and we should be good to craft this. So there we go. We have the farming station. Very, very cheap to get. And one thing to note, you can have shears as one of the tools, but we're not going to be using that today just because it's going to shear everything, and we do not want to get a bunch of leaves. It'll destroy the shears really fast because it shears every single one of them, and it'll fill up our storage really, really quick. We're only going to be using a double chest right now because we haven't been able to really get into the storage part of EnderIO yet. So looking at outside, it looks like it's becoming nighttime, so we might actually want to sleep in a minute here. But I am going to be putting down the farming station right here above this block of water. It's a neat little trick if you want to mess around with it, just because the farming station is always going to be in the center of whatever area it is going to cover, and I will go over the areas it'll cover in a minute, but it's always going to be the center block. So if you want to make sure that all the stuff is able to get hydrated around it, putting down the water as the central block will help out a lot with that if you don't have other mods, whether you're putting worms in the soil, using sprinklers, all that stuff. If you don't have those mods to work with, then this is a nice thing to do for it. So we can just put down a torch since we need something to click this on with. And there we go. We now have the farming station put down. And I think it's actually probably time we go sleep just so that we can see things a little bit better, because I am going to have to break the torches before it's actually able to start planting stuff, unfortunately. Which means I'm going to have to come up with another way to light things up outside at night. And I want to break these. You guys said to use string, but unfortunately, if I put string right here, it's like readily apparent, so I'm probably going to move this anyway, but Okay, so now we should finally be ready to get to all the fun stuff that you can do with the farming station. So if we look in here, you can see there's no capacitor in there right now. It uses 40 RF per tick and has a 1 million RF storage. Now, something that has bothered me a little bit is if you look on the wiki, and I looked there to be exact because I didn't go and test this, the RF values in terms of storage and the usage are a little bit messed up right now. But if we were to throw in the double layer capacitor, you can see it goes up to 60 RF per tick and 1.5 million RF storage. And if I had to venture a guess as to what the next one would be, it would probably be, I would say 80 RF per tick and 1.5 million or 2 million RF storage. But I want to see if we have any upgrades in here that are octatic, just so that we can snag them out. I don't think we do. Yeah, so we only have double layers in here right now. The only octatic one is up there, so I can't really test it out. That's one thing that I messed up on, but do not trust the wiki with the values right now. Those are incorrect. I will be sure to test it out and then post that in the comments of the video or the description. But we're going to be working with a double layer capacitor today, so we're going to be using 60 RF per tick. Along with that, the no capacitor range is going to be a 7x7, which means it's going to extend out 3 from each side of the farming station. With a double layer, it's 11x11, so that's going to be 5 out. And then with an octatic capacitor, it is 15x15. So it goes up technically 4x4 every time. It's kind of a weird way to think about it because that's a little deceptive. But yeah, it goes up technically 4x4 every time. And so the 15 one is going to be where it caps out. That's really excessive, in my opinion, for at least what we need right now. I'm just running a little bit low on food, as you can see. So that's the main goal of this, at least at the moment. So now we've got the capacitor in there. We can throw our tools in. You can see there's one for an axe, one for a hoe, and then one for shears. Of course, we're not going to use the shears like I mentioned earlier, but you do have the option to put them in there. We also have slots for bone meal, which as far as I know is relatively new. When I used this, I think back in 1.7.10, bone meal was not an option in here, but that's really, really nice. So eventually we'll probably set up an auto crafting for the bones that we're getting from a relocator obelisk and then pipe them straight into here. And now we can start getting power for this. Something to keep in mind is just thinking a little bit ahead where you're going to be storing stuff, because you're not going to be able to use conduits to get it out of either of these 4 sides, pretty much all the sides that are directly next to the ground. So you're pretty much going to have to pull stuff out either the top or the bottom. And because we've got water on the bottom, we're going to be pulling it out the top, which means we're going to want to extend our capacitor bank up 1, just so it's not blocking where we can actually pull stuff out from. So I am going to have to grab out, we'll just use some of this glass because we should be able to break it then and use it again. But we can put the capacitor bank down, and then we're going to put all of the photovoltaic cells down up here. Now it only uses 60 RF per tick, but we're going to put all these down, and eventually we'll get an octatic capacitor on there. But I also want this to fill up so that we can actually keep it running a little bit at night at least, and then refill it easily in the morning. So eventually it will fill this up completely as long as I'm pretty good about sleeping when it becomes nighttime. But you can break that, and there we go. So everything should be good. Now you can see we're getting a message that says no seeds. If you're having any issues with this running, it should pop up sort of like an error message above it. could get a little bit annoying if you already know there's no seeds and you don't want it to be running, but it's pretty helpful if you're, just setting it up and it says no seeds, although it does kind of get messed up by the conduit. So we're getting power in here, and we can start throwing in the seeds. Now, one thing I want to point out that's a little bit deceptive about this is you might see that in the output we've got 2 flowers, some leaves, and then a bunch of types of wood, and on the input it's a little bit hard to see, but it looks like we've got melon seeds, 2 different types of, or I guess they're the same type of sapling, but 2 saplings, and then another type of seed. I can't really see below that, but if we go out and go back in, they've all completely changed. It just shows things that are available to be farmed, but it's not going to directly show you, what's going to go in that slot. So it can get a little bit confusing, but don't even bother with looking at those. They're just kind of there as an example, or just like a placeholder. So first things first, we need to look at the quadrants, and this is what I was going to say about versatility. You've got 4 quadrants here: northwest, southwest, southeast, and northeast. And you have the ability to put 4 different types of farmable things in those, with the ability to lock it, and what that does is it prevents it from putting the last one out, thus only allowing that certain farmable item to go back in there. So if I were to put seeds in one of these, and we've got to look at which one I want it to go in, and what I mean by that is I want the seeds to be in pretty much everything that's going to be on tilled soil to be on this half, because I want it to be hydrated by this water and this water under here, which means that it's going to be the northwest quadrant and the southwest quadrant. So we'll do southwest as seeds, and we will lock it. Now what this is going to do is this area is going to get planted. I do need to break these torches around here just so it can get planted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cool, so that one's just there on the edge. So it fills up this whole area. Now this will keep it at 1 if we were to get rid of one of these, and there's only one left. It would not plant that because it wants any seeds that come back in to immediately refill this spot so that it's always growing wheat for us. Now the other one is going to be the northwest, and I don't think we have enough potatoes to fill this up, so it'll be a good example of how this functions. And we do have to break this torch right here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this one right here, and we can replace it there. So it's going to plant, oh, looks like I was a little bit off with that. We can replant it there, and we should be able to put one right here. So eventually it should fill in these areas, but as you can see, it is stopped at 1 potato because we only want potatoes to go in there. So it has the ability to lock it in. If you really don't care what goes where, or you're just farming a bunch of things all at the same time, you've got all 4 quadrants as potatoes, you don't need to lock it or really, bother with that. But if you want to make sure that everything is in its designated spot, then you probably do want to make sure you lock it. Now we're going to be putting saplings in for the other portion of this. We are going to lock that. And one thing I want to point out that I've had a very difficult time coming up with how to phrase is you might notice that pretty much in here we've got odd numbers. So this is an 11 by 11, which means that, yeah, it works great with the farming station being at the center, but you've got 4 quadrants. And so they're not going to be evenly divided up perfectly like if you were looking at a grid, because you've got the, odd block in the center. So the way it looks is that each quadrant is going to extend out at one point. So this quadrant right here, the northwest quadrant, is going to be filling up this one right here. I guess this would be, what is this? The southwest quadrant is going to fill up this right here. And then I guess both the tree ones don't really matter, but you can see kind of how it does this. I don't really know how to phrase it, but there is going to be that awkward central, line of area for crops that is not going to get divvied up evenly for these. So it kind of, shifts it over one. So each one will get the same number of spaces, but it's not going to be perfectly divided up and symmetrical. But that's just something that it always, bothered me a little bit about how it would work. And I guess that's how they solved it. So you can see we're running a little bit low on bone meal here, but we've already started using up some of the durability of our tools. Something to note is when trees do grow, they don't get chopped down one by one in terms of, like you'll see right here when this one gets chopped down, it just all disappears at once, just completely gone. So once that happens, all the stuff will get taken away. It doesn't get chopped down, one piece of wood at a time. So it's actually pretty darn nice. Now it does get a little bit weird if you've got, trees connecting. So if one tree were to grow and connect with this right over here, it would read this as the same tree and just chop this all down too. So something to keep in mind, where you're planting these. I did make sure to plant these far enough away from the wall that the trees should be able to grow. This here might be a little bit of a problem inhibiting this right here, but for the most part, this farm setup should be good. And you can see the power is building up and everything should be good to go. So really the last thing to do is to just start getting this stuff out of here, which means we're going to take the item conduit, put it right up here, and we can just run it right over to here. And we'll break this torch, put one over here, and we've got, this one's going to get broken and put right there. I should actually make sure all these are okay. Put a lot of torches down for now until we can find a way to fix this. But that should be good. So we can come back over here, put down the double chest right here, and just easily run this conduit over to it. And that should give us a fair bit of storage for all of this. We can auto craft stuff down eventually. And set that to insert. And just got to change the redstone mode on this side. Extract, always active. And boom, there we go. We're getting our oak wood. We're getting our wheat. And if we were to go get a bunch of bone meal from in here, because we've got a very large supply of bones right now, as you can see, it's actually going to be really nice when we start auto crafting with this, because we've got a lot of stuff to get rid of in there. We can throw these in and drop them in here and watch it speed up. So there we go. It doesn't go through the bone meal too fast, so it's not going to make everything instantaneously grow, but we should be able to see hopefully some trees grow from it. I don't know really how it determines which block gets bone mealed, or if it goes, one at a time through all of them. But, ooh, is that our first potato crop that'll get harvested? Very nice. Okay, so I think that's going to be it for today, guys. It's becoming nighttime again, which means I'd have to sleep, but I don't really feel like doing that right now. Just a nice short episode to, tell you guys what's going on with me returning to school and show you all about the farming station, which in my opinion is a very, very awesome farming block. I would highly advise you to mess around with it and use it. But yeah, that's it for today, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you found it entertaining or informative in any way, please feel free to give it a like, as it does help me out a lot. I apologize if my voice was, bad at all. I did have to cut a couple times because I was starting to get a little bit hoarse and I needed to drink some water. But yeah, hopefully any of you guys that had spring break had a nice time, and I will talk to you guys later.